Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time zone, whenever you are watching this, we are so happy you're here. Welcome to the Power to Fly Chat and Learn. My name is Hunter. My pronouns are he, they. And yes, I also have a Chihuahua in my lap, and his name is Francis. He's going to be asking the questions. I'm just here taking orders. So I'm so excited to be jumping into this conversation. Before we do, just a little bit of housekeeping we're going to do right here. This is an interactive experience, friends, and we want to hear from you. So you can participate. Feel free to turn on your cameras. You don't got to worry about looking Instagram ready. This is just two people and other folks like you hanging out, and we're talking. And this is going to be a really, really awesome conversation. I'm so excited. So you can ask your questions in the chat. You can go ahead and ask them publicly, or if you want to ask something anonymously, you can DM me. You can go select my name over in the chat function, DM me, and I will happily ask that on your behalf. So you have that ability. We are recording this, so we're going to send a rewatch link in the next few days, and you can also find it on the Power to Fly Chat and Learn YouTube channel, which is pretty cool. There's so many great chats there, and this is going to be one of them. Okay, friends. So we are going to jump in with Ciera Parks, Vice President, People, Operations, and Culture of Vangst. So Ciera is a human resource executive with 15 years of experience in higher education, manufacturing, nonprofit, cannabis, keyword of the day, e-commerce, and technology. Ciera is the Vice President of People and Culture at Vangst, the nation's largest cannabis hiring platform. Pretty cool. A top priority for her is in this role is to close the systemic diversity gap within the cannabis industry. Ciera helps drive business operations forward with organizational structures by maximizing people and technical approaches. Her expertise in building organizations and developing people strategies delivers measurable results, and that's what we like to see. So please give a round of applause to Ciera Parks. Welcome, Ciera.
Hello, Hunter. Hey, Power to Fly family. I'm excited to be here to chat with you all.
I'm excited to chat with you. And yes, we got Colleen calling in from Missouri. Oh, we got some digital applause from people. I love this. I can almost hear it. And we got someone from Georgia coming in. I'm calling in from New York City. So Ciera, I read a little bit about your bio there, some highlights. Can you tell me a bit about yourself, a bit about your career journey? What got you to where you are today?
Yeah, so been in HR a long time. Don't let the smooth face fool you. And got headhunted into cannabis, right? So I'd had a career in HR for quite a while before that. Got headhunted into the space, and at first I was like, wow, this is a little crazy, right? I think one of the things, especially earlier on in my career, is that cannabis was definitely something that was precluded from the workplace and the workspace in every way, shape, and form. And so to come work in an industry that I had initially really been working and in the role that precluded people from being able to do it and be a participant was very interesting for me. So did that, came into the cannabis space, and been here ever since, right? I think it's a very exciting place to be. And in career-wise, you learn so much. I don't care what anyone says, HR and cannabis is a wild, wild space, and you learn so much so quickly with all the ever-changing regulation. And so it's definitely a space to continue to learn and grow, and you never know everything all at once, but it's good. It's a good place.
Awesome. So can you tell me a bit about your role as Vice President of People and Culture at Vangst, and especially in its relation to diversity and inclusion?
Absolutely. So the first one is community partnerships that align with identifying and sourcing diverse talent. So that's one of my key initiatives, right? And so you'll see that in my platform, and a lot of the things that I get involved with in the cannabis community are about how do we make and amplify voices for diverse populations within the cannabis industry. Another one is education in the market. So how do we further having conversations just like this, Hunter, like the one we're having today, to make sure people are thinking about diversity in everything that they do in their business, be it cannabis or otherwise. And then, of course, education internally, right? We have a really great team at Vangst, and we're always excited to have conversations and explore what this means for how we can really change the industry from the seat that we sit in.
And so what would you say are some of the largest problems that are going on right now? What is this overview of this current state and of when it comes to diversity within the cannabis industry? And what are you working on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things in the diversity space that's happening in cannabis. The first one is the lack of diversity in leadership. And so I think if you look around the industry, and you can do this for yourself, right? If you go onto any major cannabis page and you look up who the investors are, you look up who the board of directors are, you look up who leadership of the operating team is, and overwhelmingly, it's not very diverse. And so I think that's one of the first things that's happening in the space that really speaks volumes about where the cannabis is currently. The other thing you think about is, and what I'm excited about is seeing the growing foothold of women in cannabis, minority ownership in cannabis. So while it's still very small, it's growing significantly, right? Like we're really starting to see those groups be on the map, really get publicized, really be in the media, really be recognized for the work that they're doing and the adversity that they're facing, but still winning. And then there's quite a few equity programs that are popping up. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that, I'm sure. And then more efforts to diversify the industry are growing. And so you're seeing programs that are popping up. You're seeing people who are engaged and actively doing this work and committed to the hard work and the labor. There's still very much so a barrier for access to capital. And so that's still something, especially in states where people are waiting on licenses or trying to stand up their businesses, or states are flipping and they're having to deal with compliance issues. That's still something that's a really big deal for them to combat. And then, of course, another good thing that we're seeing in space is great advocacy programs, right? These things are really starting to take foothold in the industry and start to show up in meaningful ways and starting to get results and visibility that they need to continue the process that they're looking to drive.
Yeah, there's so much in there, right? You know, there's so many steps. There's these initial barriers. There's, like you said, the access to capital has been limited, and there's these new initiatives that are helping, but it's only doing so much right now, right? So what are other ways, like what's the nitty gritty of getting in there and helping folks get access to these things? Is it education? You know, like I'm already learning things in this conversation with you right now, and we're only 5 minutes in, right? Like, is there like almost like an onboarding process of like, hey, this is what you have like access to? And when you're working with folks, like, is that part of the process of just letting them know what's available?
Yeah, I think that's a really great place to start. I think the first thing you want to be able to do is really assess your business, right? So where is your organization on its journey to diversity in general? The other part of it is to understand the operational structure of your business, right? So what does it look like for us to say we're going to infuse this? Where can we be intentional about this? Where should we be tapping partners? There is a long list of partners that you can get involved with who are very committed to doing this work. And they're severely underfunded, right? But they're still very much so in the trenches to make sure that people are going to be able to have access to education, skills and training, development, resources, just good partners, thought partners. And of course, where to get good supplier diversity from, right? There is just so much happening in the space. And so really being able to drill down and say, I know who we are and I know how we can be intentional is going to be the critical next step for driving diversity for cannabis businesses.
The need to be intentional. I think that is just, that's a life mantra that I can live by, right? Just put it right above the lens. Always look at that before I ask a question. And speaking of asking questions, folks, if you want to ask questions, ask them often, ask them early, drop them in the chat. We want to make sure we get to all of them. I'm firing off some of my own. You've also pre-submitted questions in advance. Thank you for that. There's some really great stuff in here. So feel free to keep those coming in. So Ciera, you touched on there's these large things that are going on. And can you dig in a little about what are some of the major barriers to diversity and inclusion in the cannabis industry? And this might be the obvious part of the question, but why is it so essential to address them?
Yeah, so I'll start with the barriers so we can back into what these magical solutions are. So the first one is, right now, the cannabis industry is in a very unique space, right? Economically, financially, and there's all these things happening around us, right? So rescheduling, federal banking didn't go through. And so I think the first thing or the first major barrier is with all of these things that are happening, is the organization still being intentional about its efforts and commitment to inclusion and diversity? I think that's the first thing, because when this much transition or challenge is happening, I think one of the first things that I've seen go in my career is D&I, right? That is the first thing people say, get this off the plate. This is no longer a priority. We need to focus on other things. So I think that's where we need to start to address, right? Let's just stay in the game and be committed to the space that we said we wanted to be in. The next one is diversity and inclusion is not always top of mind. And so what does it mean for you to layer this in very strategically, pivot, right? How can your business right now pivot in cannabis to make sure that you're still very much so committed to diversity and inclusion, but also figuring out how to infuse this in a way that's going to generate revenue for you? And then another barrier is I think the cannabis industry, regardless of how long it's been around, is still relatively new in some of the other industry best practices. And so things like measuring what's happening, getting metrics in the space is still not the best. And so that's why I think one of the really great things that everyone can do here today is participate in the Vangst salary guide, either on the side of an employer or a participant or employee of the industry, because it's those kind of metrics that help us measure what exactly is happening in the industry and how we can move the needle forward. But having good data on the front end helps us know what we should be doing next.
Yeah. The data says it all, right? You know, we can talk a big game, and as you can see, we got some links here in the chat. Very cool. Please check out those as well. So some of those resources that Ciera just mentioned, you can go ahead and click on those in the chat right there. So how do you get them to stay in the game, right? You get this data, and then you're like, oh, well, budget cuts. We gotta get rid of this. Like you said, D&IB, one of the first things to go on the chopping block always, because for some companies, it might be a checkbox, it might be lip service. And then when the winds change, that can be the first to go. So how do you get folks to be like, no, this is important, and this is why it's important. Here's the data. How do you get them to stay?
Yeah, so our approach is really all about strategic alignment, right? I think a lot of times what we see happening is DEIB is kind of living over here by itself in its own silo. And really what should happen with all D&I initiatives is that they should be layered into the business organically, right? This shouldn't be something that we have to reach out to get and decide we want to put it on top, right? This should be like the icing in between every layer of the cake that we have as a business. And that's how you really keep it in the game, right? That's what you want to be able to do if you say, I want long-term sustainable impact in my organization and all the benefits that come from it in the D&I space.
Yeah, I like that too. Just this icing layer just makes every bite a little more sweet in the process, doesn't it?
It does.
So let's talk about, how does this, we're addressing this lack of diversity, right? How does this obviously impacts folks that are underrepresented groups because they're just not even involved? And how does it also affect the industry as a whole?
That's a great question. I love that question. Let me tell you why. So often I hear, this is not my fight. This is not my problem. This is not something that I identify with. Why do we keep bringing this up, right? And what ends up happening here, if we just drill this all the way down to good dollars and cents, what this ends up being is that organizations who invest in D&I work, D&I initiatives, having a diverse team will automatically see better revenue, increased productivity, more innovation faster, and then on the back end of that, enjoy a better brand reputation. And I'm not just talking about the traditional demographics like age, race, sex. I'm talking about things like thought diversity. I'm talking about things like educational background, professional work history. Those are also diverse topics. And so how is it that we are intentional about where we recruit from? What are the educational requirements on the people that we hire and the jobs that we post? Where are we making sure that we're having space and holding space for people to be able to bring diverse thoughts to the table? All of those things matter and increase your revenue, productivity, your output, your innovation. And so we're not just talking about, oh, bring more people in that look different. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that that is part of it. But if you are really going to be wanting to see what happens in your space, in your work environment, in the cannabis industry overall, you're going to want to make sure you include people who have various types of experience in their background to really color what happens in your organization on the other side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thought diversity. I love that as a benchmark, right? Because again, that's going deeper. That's a different layer of icing, right? That's not just, oh, we have someone that looks like this, someone that looks like this. That you're actually getting different cultural experiences, perhaps different economic experiences when you're getting these people that have these opinions, right? And these lived experiences.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the big examples I always like to explain to people is, what does it mean for you to sit in a room, develop a product or a service, and not have anyone in the room who says, hey, I can tell you for sure that that product or service doesn't help at all the community that you think you're tackling. Like, someone has to sit in the room and say, hey, let me show you some other ways that you can perhaps think about this, or other ways we could target our customers, or why this will or won't work or be impactful in the way that you think it is. That is what good thought diversity and diversity in general does for a room in a conversation about product development, innovation, really starting to build your brand and grow your business.
Yeah. Are there any top of mind experiences that you've had of working with a company? You don't have to say who, of course, but working with some examples of going from, let's say, if it's a scale of 1 to 10 and you're aiming for a 10 and they were at a 0.5. What is that trajectory like?
Yeah, in regard to diversity, Hunter?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen lots of articles printed as of late that speak to what it means to be a person of color in the workplace, or a diverse person in the workplace, and how when organizations aren't intentional about this, they really drop the bomb, right? And so this looks like major lawsuits. This looks like major turnover, brand reputation that is so much put in the trash and the toilet behind it. It looks like people saying they don't want to work for you, so now you don't have a talent pipeline. This is a real thing. And so when you have people who are leaving your organization in the masses, you really got to consider what you're doing there. And you can't just say, this is what's happening in the market, right? All of it can't be attributed to that. And so I really think it's important for organizations to consider how you're showing up in the workplace, how you're marketing your brand, who you have out in front of the organization, and what that means for you long-term. Who do you want to attract? Who do you want to buy your product? Who do you want to be engaged, right? Are those the thought leaders that you really want pushing your business? And if not, how do you say you're going to intentionally pivot, right? Like, that word keeps coming up, right? Being intentional, but really making the pivot there to say, this is what we want, and we want it to look a little bit different than perhaps what it does today.
Yeah. And what are some successful diversity initiatives or strategies that have been implemented in the cannabis sector so far?
Yeah. So I tread lightly on saying successful, right? Because I think there's been a lot of things that have been tried in the industry. And I think that some of the things are still coming around on whether or not they've shown to be successful all the way through, even though they may have had good intentions when they first started. So social equity programs, we have those in tons of states. And this is a good example of where I think the intention was good. Perhaps it really did seem like the right avenue at the time, but then on the back end, some things fizzle out. And people who are actually, the programs were designed to help, are being hurt on the back end, right? So things like moratoriums on how long they have licenses, and then how they get bought out. And so those are things where, again, very well meaning at the onset, but maybe not quite what they asked for on the back end. Another one is community and reinvestment programs. So things like skill training, development, training programs, upskilling in general, being intentional about saying, maybe we got some pots of money and we reinvested in the communities that were traditionally hurt by the war on drugs, those type of investment programs. Of course, you have organizations themselves who are committed to internal corporate programs or initiatives surrounding DEI. So you've seen those pop up and really start to proliferate the community. You also have cannabis associations who are committed to doing that kind of work. And of course, you have inclusive and diverse ownership and branding, right? So brands who have popped up and said, I'm woman owned, I'm minority owned, and we're able to really now make a footprint in the industry in some respect around how it is that we're showing up and marketing our products.
So I love how you preface to the top, like, well, success, that's a strong word. What would you say makes these initiatives effective? And also on the other side, what make them totally ineffective?
So I think effective would be there is an impact, right? Populations are benefiting from the program as they were designed to work. 100% what I would say is effectiveness. I think what's happening though is when we have these programs that were initially put out into the world, what we have on the backside is that there are some unintended consequences, right? So regulations, barriers to capital access, having money up front to float the business, even if you got a license, and then kind of having these predatory folks who swoop back around and say, hey, I'll buy up licenses in a way that maybe goes against everything that the program was initially started to do. And so that's where I say, very well meaning, right? But always in some way, having to kind of keep watch for what could have been a negative blowback on the program or the initiative.
Yeah. And have there been experiences that you've witnessed that, like you said, when you've seen people don't want to work there anymore, you get a bad reputation? Have you seen some companies just completely go under from this? Is there any recovery from it?
Absolutely. So the average HR lawsuit is somewhere around $100,000+. And so with margins that are slim because of 280E taxes, Hunter, you can imagine how having a lawsuit that hits you at $100,000+ from the EEOC or civil rights or something that's quietly put down can drive a business out of business. And so those are the kind of things you may not hear about. Those are the kind of things that maybe don't surface all the time, but you have to consider at a lawsuit that size, that really may be what puts your business and closes the doors.
Well, that's a testament to get on the right track, isn't it?
It is. It is. It is. And I mean, sometimes it's really not until the dollars start to hit you that you're concerned about it. But we got to be honest about there are laws. And if you're not going to follow the laws and people are savvy about what's available to them and what the right thing to do is, people will go ahead and they will file that claim. They will tell on you. They will escalate. And so if you really want to make sure that you're keeping the right people, you got the right buzz around your organization, it's simple. Do the right thing.
Yeah. So let's talk about the simplicity. Let's talk about those practical steps, right? From a business perspective, what are some of those practical steps that cannabis companies can take to increase diversity within their organization and leadership teams?
All right. So the first, and this is to say, I don't care where you are on your journey, you can start right here. The first one is you want to measure where you are now. You cannot move the needle until you understand what is currently happening. What are your demographics? Who do you have working for you? What are the buckets or initiatives that you're currently working on? That's the first thing. Just measure where you are. You got to get a baseline. The next thing you want to do is you want to start having conversations about this. So often, this is something that leaders say, hey, I don't want to talk about this because we don't have all the information or we don't know what the right thing to do or say is. And so we just kind of avoid it like the plague. And what I am encouraging you to do is have open, transparent, candid conversations. If you're a leader, you're watching this today, and you're saying, hey, you know what? I really want to start on my journey. I encourage you, reach out to me. Let's just have a conversation, right? Let's chat about how we can be helpful to you. But you got to start having conversations to know how much of this Pandora box do you want to open? What's the climate in your organization? What's the benefit for you? How do your other employees feel? We got to start having conversations. Then from there, you can identify your why. Why are you doing this? What are you hoping to improve? How does this help your brand? How does this help your reputation? How does this grow revenue or tap a new market? Those are the kind of things. What is your why? Why are you doing this? Because when things get tough and you're deciding what you want to cut from the budget, we got to be able to circle back to the meaningful why to understand we're going to stay committed. Let's just stay the course. Once you have your why, I want you to focus on your efforts. Really think about what we can be doing. We don't got to boil the ocean here. What are the small things that we can do along the way that are going to be the most impactful? Maybe having that conversation is enough for your organization today. Maybe doing the survey is enough today, right? Maybe putting out your transparent salary, that's enough today, right? But you got to start somewhere and you got to start making an impact. So you really got to focus in on what are our efforts going to be? And then once you have those small wins under your belt, you remeasure. How did that move the needle? What did that do for us? Did it increase the profit? Did we get better retention? Did our candidate pool look better? Were we able to innovate something quicker, faster, better, stronger? And then we repeat, right? What are the next small things? Do we pivot? Do we think about what our other why is? Did we solve for what our original problem was or whatever we were trying to address? So that cycle just repeats itself after that, right? We just keep talking about it. We keep refocusing. We keep committed, and then we measure.
Rinse and repeat.
That's it.
So I'm curious, what roles do consumers play in promoting diversity in the cannabis industry?
Good question again. So I think you have to consider, right? Probably more of the world is consumer than actually in the industry, just by sheer numbers. And so some of the things that you can do to really drive the needle here and really make an impact, if you say, hey, I'm committed to this, I want to see the industry change. First thing you can absolutely do is start supporting diverse brands. Whenever you go into a shop, what does it mean to buy from a brand that is a minority brand, a woman-owned brand? Support it. Another thing that you can do is you can support legislation for banking so that there is access to capital, right? People can take traditional loans or figure out how to get money to support, grow, and scale their business. Another thing is you can support expungement efforts and decriminalization of cannabis. I'm not here to walk down the political aisle with you, but I think if we're talking about how diversity and inclusion has shown up in the world, it's highly politicized. And so that does mean you have to take your vote to the polls and start doing the right thing and voting in ways that move the needle for what you're passionate about. And then another thing that you can do is you can start to participate in the salary guide data collection, because it is through pay transparency that we are able to say we are leveling the playing field and pulling other people into the space.
Talk to me more about what is learned and what actions can be taken with pay transparency.
Yes. So in providing pay transparency, what happens is, so you have someone, I'll give you a really good example. You have someone who says, you know what, I really want to enter the cannabis industry, but I just don't know enough about it. And I don't know anyone who looks like me intimately enough to be able to ask them about what the money looks like in this space, right? Maybe I have some ideas about everyone's getting rich over here. I have some ideas about no one's getting paid, but not being able to see what others are being paid in the industry prevents you from really having all of the knowledge you need to make a decision about your career. If you are an organization who is operating above what average market scale is for pay, this helps you, right? This helps you recruit. If you are someone who is paying perhaps what under market scale is or below average scale, I want you to be considerate of what that means when you're trying to recruit talent. But at least having pay transparency helps you as a business owner understand where you should be paying folks. Also, by having pay transparency, we're able to be very fair about some of the pay disparity and gaps, right? And so your average white man making X amount of dollars in the industry, and then you have a Black woman who perhaps is making 60 cents on a dollar to that. And so how do we say that in this industry, if we can't control that in other spaces, people are going to be paid the same for the same amount of work and for the same type of work?
Yeah. Well, if you want to participate, folks, in the salary guide, Ciera just dropped that link in the chat as well. Also, if you're rewatching this, we'll make sure we'll include all these juicy resources. And I love all of these links that you're dropping in, because these are actionable things that folks can do, right, Ciera?
Absolutely. Yeah. Do them today, right? Start where you are. I really want to encourage people that when you are starting to embark on this D&I journey, it's not about you saying that we need to go change the whole world tomorrow. Like, that's not where we are. You sit in a community, you sit in a room, you sit in an office, you sit on a team, and you being the voice there sometimes is enough for people to feel safe. I want to also put out there, Hunter, that having pay transparency and other things that people can do to support this is really looking at what your hiring requirements are. Right? So if you're running a background check on your people, I want you to consider what it means to lean in on, does a drug charge or a marijuana charge preclude someone from working at your industry or working in your organization? I can't say yes or no, because we know that cannabis is highly regulated and there might be times where it absolutely does. But in other spaces where you do have some input, you do have some say, you want to be a cannabis advocate, especially for diversity and inclusion, those are the conversations that you can have with your employer today to figure out whether or not we're not hiring people with simple cannabis charges, and is that precluding them from working with us and really adding to that thought diversity and experience diversity of our workforce.
Right, because if it was just some, unjust, and now in hindsight, right? Like an unjust charge, it's on someone's record. It can really smear all of these opportunities, and then you're missing out on a really awesome potential candidate.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so what does it take to get companies and get folks to understand that that could be a possibility? Because I think a lot of people just brush it off like, oh, they have a criminal charge, not even going to consider it.
Yeah, I mean, let's have a conversation, right? If you are in a space where you think you want to reconsider your hiring practice, I encourage you, call Vangst, right? That is what we do. Let us talk you through what might be a place for you to explore this. Maybe not all roles, right? But maybe we just have a conversation about what your hiring practices are, what your workforce development plan looks like, what it means to bring people into your organization, what it means to source talent for you in a way that's really meaningful and impactful to your long-term business strategy. Those are the types of things we want to talk to folks about. And so it's funny, Hunter, you asked me that because I think it's just a conversation. Let's just figure out what's feasible first. And then on the back end, right, see what we can do to make a change.
Yeah. So it also on the topic of having conversations, earlier you mentioned about folks that are saying when they're looking around and they don't know how to talk about the money, there's nobody that maybe looks like me here to talk about this. I get uncomfortable talking about finances. How do you help people through that process? Because there's so much emotional baggage, trauma, discrimination that is associated and connected to with lack or lack thereof of finances.
Yeah. So, and let me make sure I got this right, Hunter. You're saying just from a particular employee perspective, perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I think you got to ask the right questions, right? And I encourage everyone, regardless if you're looking for a job in the cannabis industry or elsewhere, you should be having comfortable questioning or lines of questionings about pay transparency, increases, bonuses, etc. very early on in the conversation. How far down in the conversation of employment are you going to get before you say, oh yeah, by the way, what does this job pay? And so I really encourage you to ask those questions and know that that's not a weird question. That is not an inappropriate question for you to ask. Now, I'm not saying you show up to the interview and say, hello, my name is Ciera, what are you paying? No, don't do that, right? But you need to be thoughtful about where it makes sense to have those conversations. And you also need to be looking at job postings, right? Traditionally now, you're seeing more and more companies start to post what the salary or the pay is on positions. And so some states even require you to do that. And so I would encourage you to ask those types of questions, even if you feel uncomfortable early on in the conversation, so you know what you're actually looking at as you embark on this interview. And of course, it's not to waste people's time, right? Like you got to know what your number is, and where it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned too, and it's different in states, some states require it. And that makes me think about how legislation is different from state to state. And then we also have on the national level, there's a huge disparity of what's going on there. So how do folks navigate when they're like, oh, I have this idea, I'm a business owner, or I want to start in this business? Should they think locally and just start where they are first, as opposed to like, oh, I want to have this huge company that's statewide or multiple states?
In cannabis, yes. In cannabis, yes. One thing I will say, having been in cannabis for a while now, is that cannabis is very small. It's a very small industry. And so you might be able to really do a lot just by tapping into your local organizations, your local big players, your informal leaders, your government leaders, your advocates, associations in the state that you're in. And I think it's going to be very important for any business looking to really strike up a foothold in the market to say that I have an established fan base, if you will, in my home state. And once you do well there, you can start to look at expansion. You have a reputation, your products will precede themselves, but like you got to really be good where you are and understand where you are, because if you can't operate in the state that you're in with all the compliance, legislation, regulations, it's going to be really hard for you to move across the state line and figure it out there where you don't have any connections.
Yeah, absolutely. Good advice. Okay, so let's talk about some long-term benefits. In your opinion, what are some long-term benefits of achieving greater diversity and inclusion within the cannabis industry?
So probably most importantly for me, It's just saying that we righted the wrong from the war on drugs. I think it's crazy conceptually for us to say that we put people in jail for cannabis in astronomical numbers. And now so many people are on the other side of this, making money off the same industry while people still sit in jail. People aren't able to benefit. People can't even come into the space and be involved in the space because of their record, or people are perhaps precluded from getting any type of gainful employment. And so for me, it's saying, let's just right our wrongs and really include people who were the pioneers, the legacy operators, number one. Number two, statistics are showing that this is going to make your company better. And so if you're not doing it for the altruistic reason, I do encourage you to at least do it for what will happen to your profit and your revenue as a business on the other side of infusing diversity in your organization. I don't think anyone's going to sit back and say, hey, we infuse diversity and we're mad at the revenue growth that we've seen, or we're mad at the new population or the new target markets that we've attracted, or we're mad at the new innovation that we've had in the lab or the marketing department or the R&D. Like, those are not things that you're mad at. And so if you're not sure about whether or not you want to be committed to this, I would say try it for if no other reason that. And then we all win.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a win-win for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk about now from the other perspective for individuals that are interested in pursuing careers in cannabis, but they may feel discouraged due to the lack of diversity. Do you have any recommendations or advice to those folks?
Yeah, look right here, y'all. If this is you identify in this way, I would tell you, you got to put that out of your mind, right? Like, there are enough diverse folks who have trailblazed in this space enough for you to have an advocate and an ally and a partner. And so if you are concerned about what that transition looks like or coming into the industry, find an ally, find an advocate. People want to help you. And so talk to someone, find a mentor, someone who is going to really help you navigate the space, and then do it. Do it.
With intention.
With intention. Do your research. Do your research. Know where you're going, who you're working with, and the reputation that they have. That's really important. I think, what we might see or continue to see is people who are putting out a lot of lip service. And so I don't want you walking into an organization that doesn't truly cherish who you are and how you show up as a diverse person. So do your research, know who you're working with, and ask the right questions along the way in the interview process.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a few more questions before we wrap up, Ciera. This is so fantastic. And friends, if you have any last burning desire questions, drop it in the chat and we'll ask them. But this is, if not now, when, my friends? Okay. So, we just got, great. That's from you as well. So as we look forward, towards the future of the cannabis industry, what are your hopes, Ciera, and expectations regarding the process of diversity and inclusion?
Ironically, Hunter, I hope that we don't have to have conversations like this. And what I mean by that is that diversity and inclusion is so woven into the fabric of the industry that people don't think of it as a set aside. People don't think of it as an afterthought. People don't think of it as something that's disposable in their business plan, right? It becomes truly woven into everyday ways of life. And so that everything we do is colored by diversity and inclusion. Everything we do is in some way painted by what it means to be inclusive in our practices and make sure that our people feel belonged in the industry. And so, I would hope that, this is just not something that we have to think about as much because we think about it every day.
We got a great question in the chat here. Are there any states, companies, or brands that are doing DE&I right? If yes, what are they doing and how are they seeing the benefits?
So I think there are a lot of companies who have started initiatives. So I would tell you to Google in, right? Of course, I'm going to say Vangst, but I'm not going to co-sign on anyone else in that way. But I would say do your research to understand what the initiatives really mean, who the initiatives really impact, what metrics they're tracking, where are they putting their dollars, have their dollars dried up with the way the economy or the industry is going? Have they cut people from their team that were pivotal in doing this type of work? Is the industry no longer interested in doing the work, right? Do your research to understand in that way. Some really good initiatives that I've seen is really good partnerships. I'm drawing a blank on his name, but there's been some really good partnerships around having people who were legacy folks who may have been incarcerated and then having them come and represent brands in the industry. So I've seen that. I think that's been a really beneficial one. Community work and involvement is another one. Expungement clinics sponsored by large organizations or small organizations just alike. Organizations who are really committed to hiring folks who may have been incarcerated during the war on drugs. People who are really pushing the narrative forward around finding access to capital, helping businesses stand up their companies in ethical ways, right? So they're not being predatory in how they talk or help these folks, but really leaning in to say, I ethically want to help you get your business right. And then of course, right, social equity programs, departments of labor who are really pushing those types of key initiatives in their states to make sure that people can be a part of the industry in a way that's meaningful for them, the state, employers in that state, and then those who want to work in the state in the cannabis industry as well. That was a good question. See how you tried to back me into give me the name. I wasn't going to do it.
No, this isn't your first rodeo. You know how to talk. This is the right way to do it. That was really, very, so I'm, like I said, there's gonna be a rewatch link. You could just take that clip right there and rewatch that 4 times because there was so much fantastic information right in that, friends. Ciera, you do a lot of, working with people. You have conversations like these. What's the question that people don't ask you that you wish they did?
You know what? Hunter, that's a good question. I wished more people, when they had conversations like this, would actually follow up to do what they said they wanted to do. So maybe not a question, but that's what I wish. So if you were saying, hey, I really want to have a conversation with you, okay, call me. Call me, email me, right? Or, I really want to be able to make an impact. What can we do? And I give you some things and then I turn back and I say, hey, what happened to that? Oh, we just couldn't get it off the ground, right? And so for me, it's do and follow up in a way that matches your energy initially.
Yeah, here for that. And if you could go back in time and give yourself, let's say, I don't know, 10 years ago, or maybe before you entered this specific industry, what advice would you give yourself, knowing what you know now?
Knowing what I know now, oh gosh. I would say stay authentic, stand for the right thing, and then let the chips fall where they may.
There's only so much we can control, right? And then the rest is out of our hands. Well, Ciera, this has been absolutely fantastic. I am so grateful that I got to chat and connect with you. I look forward to talking to you more because I know I'm going to, because I am going to follow up. And so tell us where friends can check you out and follow you, websites, LinkedIn, socials. Give us all the things.
I am a LinkedIn genie. So find me on LinkedIn, connect with me there. You can also email me over at my Vangst email. Love to chat with any of you. Also, if you're watching this today or anytime in the future and you're saying, hey, I really want to be serious about committing to diversity, equity, and inclusion at my organization, I encourage you to reach out. We have services in that way. If you're thinking about what it means to stand up a business, having good HR practices, really leaning into building the foundation for your organization, reach out to us at Vangst. Let's help you find the right talent.
Fantastic. Ciera Parks, thank you so much for making the time today. And I look forward to chatting with you more. And thank you, everyone, for being a part of this conversation. Watch the rewatch link, share it with your friends. That's an actionable item you can do, is by getting the word out and have more people have this be a priority for more people. So thank you again, Ciera. Another round of applause to you and to all of you. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
All right, you too. Thanks, guys.
All right, take care, y'all.